All right, this is the Zoom meeting about the theme of creativity coming up for May 2018. And the way I do these is to do three things. I think it helps. And I'm not a fundamentalist webinar offering host. If you have something compelling that you need to say, go for it. But the three things that I generally cover are the challenges, then we take a little break, we think about that, the solutions we might come up, and the takeaways. So that's three ways we do this. And before we start that, I offer an overview to everything. Hey, there's Karina. I offer a general overview, highlights of the packet as I saw it. And what's wonderful about being the Soul Matters packet author is that when I talk to you guys, everyone uses this in a different way. It's so fascinating. I think Corinna said one day she used the Wonder Box for a youth program or for an intergen. So just because I say it a certain way or write it a certain way, I rely on your own creativity as religious educators to do with it as you wish. So here's my overview part. The whole theme of creativity is near and dear to my heart. I think if there was a type of multiple intelligences that's about creativity, and I think there is, that's something that it's my favorite place to reside. And growing up UU, everything I did in the UU faith was to expand the paradigm from age first grade in California, remembering something we did with honeycombs and eating them on saltine crackers and tasting the salty sweet together. And that was back in 1960. To youth and meeting the Black Panthers in Philadelphia at age 16 in 1968 while all that was happening. And understanding the creative process that these men and women in the Black Panthers were using to meet the needs of their community at the time. So I think our faith is a creative faith. And we are encouraged to be creative people. So there you go for the packet. I'm going to tell you the things that stood out in my mind. So you all are like sort of like my online family, really, because I thought I'd share with you how I write this packet. I always start with the youth and young adult process, part of the packet. And excuse me, I'm highly medicated. I have that awful crud that's going around, so don't mind me. I start with the youth and adult pages, because that's where I want our big image and our big impact to reside. We concentrate so much on our little children and our elementary school children, but that book I wrote back in '04 about making lifelong UUs, the impact comes in youth group, whether it's middle school or youth or young adult stuff. So in the creativity packet, I played with the whole God is creativity metaphor, and it comes out of some theology. And Scott and I were talking about this, and he mentioned it, and of course, now I can't remember what it was. So if anyone knows, stick it up in the chat box, that God is the creative power of the universe. There's something in there. So, you know, religious educators, we don't have all that theology. And okay, let me say it this way. I don't have all that theology. I never went to seminary, so it's there somewhere. However, I love the idea for the youth to explore God is creativity, because so many times when we do coming of age programs, we ask them to write this credo, and the kids over and over say, I don't believe in God, and they think that's going to shock this congregation. That's how stereotyped they are. They think adults are going to be shocked by that, and the adults are like, yeah, okay, big deal. And so instead, I challenge them to think of God as the process of creativity, whether it's mathematical, whether it's the creative power of the universe, the Big Bang, whether it's scientific, putting atoms together, all that. And in this packet, I didn't take it anywhere else because I wanted that to be unique to the youth and young adult page. There's two things in there which I would use with, definitely use with the youth and young adults. One is the Cheryl Wheeler song video, and she just rips people who believe in the great white able-bodied man in the clouds. She rips that up. And my kids, I think, would be really interested in it, the teens I've worked with. And then the OK Go video, this music group is fantastic. They have things like 250 printers creating a YouTube video. But this particular one, they flew up in the sky in Russia and filmed this in the moments that the parabola goes down and the plane goes down, and they are in weightless condition. And somebody on the Facebook was asking for coming of age ideas for creativity, and I said, play that video, then offer the congregation blown up balloons. They don't have to be helium. And the moral of this is, the moral of this element for a service is, gravity is overrated. And so the play is gravity, and us being serious adults in a service is overrated. And what the youth bring to us for coming of age is the remembrance of our own playfulness and creativity. So anyway, I wanted to highlight those two things. And just so you know, my brother-in-law is the one who sent me that link. He knows I was writing about creativity, and he said, Katie, you've got to use this. So thank you to my brother-in-law in Idaho. All right, so the other things that I would use, for instance, in middle school from that youth page, well, there's a link to the Wreck This Journal. And with middle school, I said to myself, of course, after the packet was published, but this is just for you guys listening, I would have them make their own Wreck This Journal. So one year what we did was each parent contributed quotes that they liked, and we stapled them together, and we gave them to the coming of agers that year as their gift, and created a little book. I think it would be fun to have the kids create Wreck This Journal page and put it together and give to each other. Oh, and then finally, where is my transcendent? Here we go. So Peter Bowden and his wife are fantastically creative people, and they have this transcendent eyeball coloring page. It's based on a quote by Emerson. And I just think this would tease out those middle schoolers, you know, when they're so irreverent and bored. I think the whole idea that Sirius Emerson was a transcendent eyeball is wonderful. And then the final thing I would do with middle schoolers, and what I threw into that youth page, was the whole idea of the brown bag skits. I don't know if you remember loving that, but whenever we do skits remember that? And you pull out these strange things and you have to make a story based on them. And again, it's irreverent, it's playful, and it's fun for middle schoolers. So that's where I start. I start with the youth and young adult things. And then I translate them into what would I do with creativity for the littlest ones. And then the final one is the elementary school students, just so you know where I go in my own thought pattern. So I just gave you an overview of youth. So now I'll give you an overview of the 4 sessions I created for the littlest ones and the elementary school kids. So the 4 things that popped out at me about creativity and what we would want to do with our children and young adult, children and littlest ones, is creativity and problem solving, creativity and justice, and that fit really well with Mama's Day, which is Mother's Day. And it also gave me a new angle on Mother's Day, which has been problematic for me and the staff I worked with. Then the weird thing came up, the whole creativity in our faith, which was the fact that that is our merger. And I think we should celebrate the things that happened in our faith. And I'll go into that more in a little bit. And then creativity and play for Memorial Day. And the whole thing on improv and jazz, which fits in so well with Memorial Day. So the whole idea of creativity and how we go into arts first when we think of creativity, I said, okay, what if we pull back from that and we do it as problem solving? And that's where you can take a walk with the kids and you can say, how could we fill in the blank? How could we? And then ask them to solve that problem. How could we get everyone over this log? How could we get everyone to the top of the jungle gym safely? How could we walk on this path without crushing the flowers? And then you mention to them that they are being very creative in coming up with their various solutions. So that fits in with my 3 S's: silence, service, and sunshine, which means experience in nature, which is sunshine, experience with leadership and responsibility, which is service, and silence, experience with their inner lives, and mindfulness and meditation. All right, so there's those 4 things. Those are the 4 sessions. And then the few last things I wanted to lift up is the For All Ages story about Kay Jorgensen, who died in January of this year. And she was one of the founders of the Faithful Fools in San Francisco. Very creative, wonderful, interesting, fascinating program with the homeless in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. And I think that would be worth lifting up for our whole congregation as a For All Ages story, that she be remembered for the incredibly risky and creative work she did there. And then, and so then there's the merger day. So in April is when our Unitarian and our Universalist faiths in 1961 merged. I don't remember it. And yet it was such an incredible event for our faith. I'm surprised that we don't commemorate it. Do you know, when we look at our sources, the sources of our living tradition, we only have 6. And I always propose a 7th. We don't have our own Unitarian and Universalist heritage in the sources that we pull as a living tradition. So I always say, okay, here's something that we pull from our heritage that we merged in May of 1961. The fact that the youth did it a year or 2 before the adults did it is worth celebrating. The fact that there was this one guy who said the Universalists were like a bunch of grapes and the Unitarians were like a head of an artichoke, that they were much more organized. That's a tactile thing. That's an element for an intergenerational service. And I would love to see us move forward serving artichokes and grapes after the service or during the service or whatever. That's a tactile thing you can celebrate for our merger. So anyway, even if you don't offer it as an intergen, there's things in it like Smokey Robinson on Sesame Street singing about yous. I'm stuck on you. You could use that for the preschoolers. Coming up with a new name, challenging our youth and young adults to come up with a new name, and doing the color merging with the paddles would be really neat thing just to do with the children if the whole congregation isn't going to do it this year, but then next year maybe it'll happen. So that's a real quick overview of the things in the packet. I hope it's helped you remember the things that happened that you thought about. And if you like to lurk, don't feel bad, but I will start asking you, what are the challenges you're facing coming up in May? It might be an actual systemic challenge. It can be something that, let's see, has nothing to do with May and creativity, or it can be something that has to do with May and creativity. So anybody want to raise their hand or give me a ping with a challenge for creativity in May? Yeah, Mary.
It's not necessarily a challenge with creativity. This is my first May because I started in October. And I'm realizing that there's so much going on for people with school and graduations and Mother's Day and all that. I'm having a hard time filling my schedule for teachers. I got 2 emails yesterday saying, oh, I can't be here this day and I can't be there. And we'd signed up for this like 3 months ago. So I thought we were good and now we're not. And so that's my problem.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yes, and it is a busy month. All right. Volunteers. All right. Sam, you want to share anything? I'll just call on you since you're next on my screen. Ha ha.
Ha ha ha. You know what? I want to echo Mary's concern about volunteers. It's the end of the year and people are tired and people are feeling burnt. And I've already started seeing that this month where I go to check the list and I'm seeing like, oh, no one's signing up. Okay, this is a problem. So we've been doing a lot more of one-room schoolhouse and inviting middle schoolers to come in and help lead the groups and read the stories and really trying. This has been working well for us this year and combining the ages and having them get to know each other because in classes they get separated and for the few teachers that can be there, it makes it much more manageable. So we're just, at this point, volunteer-wise, trying to plug through the next couple of months until our summer session starts.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Sounds very familiar. Thank you, Sam. Corinna, are you ready to speak?
Sure. I'm feeling it's interesting. We adopted Soul Matters and started using it in January. Not at the beginning of the church year. We did it kind of halfway through. I think our small group started using the themes at the beginning of the church year, and then we started using it in RE and worship in January. And my minister and I were very much on the same page about why we wanted to do themes. And that was so that families and small groups would be able to take home that theme and talk about it more and engage with it more at home. So in a way that they maybe wouldn't be able to if the sermon was on a topic that was unrelated to what the children were learning about in RE. Mm-hmm. But my minister also has worked on his own for all of his career. And he works well in advance. And we meet once a month in the month prior to schedule the month and ahead and try and get on the same page about how we want the theme to be captured each Sunday. And so I just struggle a little bit with trying to corral him and slow him down and say, look, we scheduled to talk about the upcoming month. It's usually like halfway through the month prior. So, you know, and then he says, well, I've already written my sermon for blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, what up, dude? I can't keep up with you. Because the thing is that I use the Wonderbox moment as a bridge. So he will have a sermon about it. He will take an angle on the theme for a particular Sunday, and then I will try and find the right story that will reflect that, but then also lead into what the children will be doing. And so it's kind of a linchpin thing. And so, for example, he had already written out his Mother's Day sermon, and he was taking a certain angle on it, really from a creativity perspective, but I also wanted to do it from a social justice perspective. And we worked it out and everything. It was like, oh, but I love this story, Potatoes, Potatoes. It's really good. It's about a mom and her sons taking opposing sides in a war. And Mother's Day was all about, you know, had a foundation of peace. And it was not a day where you were supposed to bring your mother flowers. It was supposed to be a day where you didn't go fight in honor of your mother. And so, you know, he'd already done everything. I was just like, Urgh. So we worked it out, but yeah.
Yeah.
I'm hoping over time, you know, and I understand that it's difficult to all of a sudden have a partner in this kind of work if you just haven't been used to doing it. But he really likes that he doesn't have to worry about that whole part of things, you know, that the Wonderbox stuff or the Time for All Ages stuff. He really likes it that I'm bringing that part in and that it's very coordinated and all that stuff. So I just have to constantly. He's a really good guy. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and it's okay. Yeah, I get it. Cool. And Margaret just left us a message that I think she's just to find out. Yes. Okay, so I won't put Margaret on the spot. And then there is a 617 person that might be interested in visiting with us, who's just on audio.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, this is Amanda Graff. Sorry, I couldn't join the actual video call today because I'm at my other job, but I wanted to hop in and I don't know, I feel similarly, like almost, I mean, having enough volunteers to teach is more just across the board a problem in my program, but one thing I'm seeing is like it's May and there's just all these end of the year things happening, so sort of hard to figure out how to fit in the curriculum with all the other things that are going on. But one thing that I am planning on doing is there's a woman who in our congregation who wrote a book about the earth and sort of her relationship to nature, and it highlights a bunch of different pieces of that. And so I'm having her come into the classroom to share the book with the kids, and then I'm hoping that we can do a sort of a project where children make a portrait of some piece of nature that has been significant to them, if it's an animal or a place or a tree or something like that. So one of the larger issues I'm trying to address in the congregation is just the divide between kind of the adult part of the congregation, the non-parenting, currently parenting population, and the families. And so next year, for instance, I'm going to have a monthly visitor to come in from the congregation, like every fourth Sunday or something, just find people that can come in to visit. So this woman it's kind of along those lines. And one of my larger question is just, I am an artist and I'm a movement artist, and I also like to make visual art, but I'm not that versed in how to actually support children to make art that ends up being really presentable. And I don't think that's what the most important in children doing art. First of all, I think art is very experiential for young children, but I would like to, in this project, I would like to figure something out about how to scaffold a process that ends in pieces that we could hang up in the parish hall, or something like that. So that's one of the things I'm trying to learn about this month. So
Nice.
yeah, and this is Amanda Graff. I don't know if I said that at the beginning. I'm sorry, I'm not
That's great.
coming up with my name.
That's okay.
Yeah, from Boston.
From Boston. Yay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
You actually completed my hope that we would have a coast-to-coast call today, because we've got California.
Oh, cool.
And we've got Boston. Awesome.
Nice.
All right.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, all right. I think we've got everyone. Margaret's lurking, and she's glad to do that. We're happy to have her lurking. So what I do now is let's take 15 seconds and think about all the challenges that Corinna and Sam and Amanda and Mary have shared, and let them rest in our minds. I was always jumping to solutions, but just let them rest in our minds for 15 seconds. And as we pull out of that short time of letting them rest, I felt my body my shoulders starting to rise, and all of the things, will there be a Sunday when you walk in and there will be no volunteer? Or will you get those calls on Saturday? I got a call that said, Katie, I'm going to be hungover, so I can't come in tomorrow. All those things that make your shoulders go up, and the job is like, this is an impossible job. I'm never going to do this. And okay, and now we're going to look around and say, no, it's going to be okay. And I'll reflect a little bit, and then I invite each other to reflect a little bit. So what I heard a lot of you say was fitting it all in. And I would reflect back to you that one of the biggest frustrations I experienced as a religious educator was the frustration of knowing how much was possible and how it wouldn't fit in. Either the parents weren't interested, the minister missed the whole shebang, or just me knowing how beautiful something could be, like a children's artwork in the foyer, and knowing it just wasn't going to fit in. And so I would have to just rest with the fact that that frustration resides in our job all the time. Just as recruitment is a frustration that resides in our job. And once I went around and I said, this is just what it's going to feel like, I could accept it and move on. And there will never be a time when we get these people running to us with open arms saying, please, please, I have to do this session on Sunday morning. I just, is that really what we want? No, because it's not going to happen. And instead, it's going to be us having to somehow fit into these busy people's lives a vision that a Sunday morning spent with our kids can be just as fun and just as rewarding as going to the sermon or staying home and reading the New York Times or the LA Times or the Denver Post, depending on where you are. So we acknowledge that and we just let it rest. But in addition, we also say, okay, the arc of the year is everyone comes in September and they're like, yeah, I love religious education. And by now, we're all getting tired of it. And they want their Sunday mornings to be spur of the moment. Hey, let's take a walk up in the woods or whatever thing's going to happen. So we expect that our people, our volunteers, are going to start fading out of they're going to fade out because summer is coming. And so you might want to schedule more multi-generational services because that doesn't take volunteers. It's perfectly okay to do that in your own self-interest because it also serves the fact that if a person comes, they get to spend the morning with their family. I love it that Mary, I think, is inviting the middle schoolers in to read the stories. Was it Mary or Sam? I can't remember. Sam. And let me tell you a story about that. When I did the interviews for the book Full Circle that I wrote for the UUA, Liz Strong, who is our first PhD religious educator, she's now probably in her 80s, she was one of my early mentors, told me that as a 12-year-old, she was asked to be a full-on religious education teacher in her Universalist congregation. And look what it led to. It led to our first full-on religious education PhD. So that changed my little paradigm from saying, oh, I've got to find something for the 12-year-olds to do, to, hey, we've got a 12-year-old who can be a resource, who's old enough to read books in Sam's congregation, who the children will love because they love that it's not just adults teaching them. Here's this really cool person who's 12 or 16 joining them and showing them what leadership looks like. So there's another way, if we don't have adult volunteers, to make sure you get stakeholders to do this, but to ask those kids who are capable to join you in offering leadership and turn that paradigm around. And then the busy month with all these things, I think you're very wise, Mary, in planning the large room schoolhouse, the one-room schoolhouse stuff, because why invite a volunteer to come and then there's one or two kids who come? It's just not going to make them want to come back. And instead, there's nothing wrong with offering family-style RE. And you make it a positive. Hey, now we're down to 8 to 10 kids. Let's offer family-style. And the children who are older who can come, they are invited to go sit in the congregation. And then the whole thing that Corinna's doing with corralling the excited minister who's off on his own, coming up with these great ideas. Yeah, that happens too, doesn't it? And I'd say, as we understand the potentials of thematic ministry, these things will evolve more naturally. And so we have to have patience that we're still doing our silos in those first 6 months. I'm still understanding the potentials of thematic ministry myself. And if so, the minister runs off and has this great idea for Mother's Day. You notice I didn't do anything on the, who's the Unitarian founder? It's not Julia Ward Howe, or was it? Anyway, that lady in the 1800s. I just didn't do that this time. But it's all good. And that's what I would say to you. If you have a minister who's taking care of Mother's Day, hey, it's all good. It gives you more time to work on whatever you want to work on, jazz or whatever it's going to be. And to be patient with each other, because we UUs are idealists and perfectionists, aren't we? And we want it to be the best it can be. And the best it can be may be that in May we acknowledge that our congregants are off doing other things. How's that? So if you have a comment, do that and unmute yourself and offer whatever solutions and reflections you might be able to offer on our challenges or on our implementation this month. Yeah, Corinna.
I was just going to say, I put something in the chat to Amanda, but she can't see the chat because she's on
good thinking.
and then Sam chimed in on that, and Margaret did too. And we were just all agreeing that Beautiful Oops is a great book to use for when you said the word scaffolding for an art project. I think I did it in a class just a couple weeks ago, and I made the I made the mistakes myself. And so it was like every child started with the same mistake of like a coffee ring on a piece of paper and some splattered paint. And then it's really fun for you to see all the different ways they take that. So for a presentation, when you're putting that up on a wall or something, there'll be some similarities between all those pieces, but also the differences will be very kind of enhanced, I guess, in a way. So I think that might be a nice book for you to check out, Amanda, in terms of having something that looks somewhat cohesive, like the kids were moving, they started with something, but they all went their own way. So
great, thank you.
Yeah, and there's lots of Margaret mentioned there's lots of projects you can find online. If you Google it, there's lots of projects that people use from that particular book. Yeah. Also, talking about volunteers and trying to get volunteers and maintaining volunteers. I was reluctant to start this in some ways, a summer curriculum that's the Passport to the World curriculum type thing, where each Sunday you go to a different location based on a vacation or a trip or a place where someone else in the congregation has lived, because it's completely hinges on that person signing up to do that. And I had between 10 and 12 Sundays so I needed 10 or 12 people. But I just did a calling all adventurers and travelers and did a big, push for people, and I got people. And so I think sometimes if you can say, it's not about you coming to help us, but you have something special that you can share. I've definitely pitched it that way, like share your stories, share what was meaningful about a particular place in the world that's special to you, with our kids. And then I will be very strict about what their lesson will look like. They are not going to just sit there and talk at the kids for 20 minutes. But yeah, I think I was pleasantly surprised, and I think it will go well. So that, I think in some ways, if you look at it like that, people can be a little more responsive. And also, none of these people are families. These are all people who don't have kids and aren't, tapped out as it is. Families get pizza night where they're fed. They don't have to come and put a presentation together for their own kids.
Awesome.
Oh, and Katie, I wanted to give you a gentle correction that my name is pronounced Karina.
Karina.
And I don't normally correct people about that, but you're the only person who's ever saying my name in these groups. So everyone's learning to say it like that. And I'm thinking, meet these people at Laredo Fall Con or GA or something, and everyone's going to start calling me Karina because you're just that powerful, Katie.
Oh yeah, I know.
It's going to make everyone start pronouncing me like that. So just so you know, my mom didn't know how to spell it right. She's not American. She didn't realize that Karina spelled like that was going to be pronounced Karina, but yeah.
Well, cool.
Karina, sure. She's from Poland, by the way.
She's from Poland. Oh, lovely. Thank you.
Sure.
I'll definitely do that. Other reflections? Yeah, Sam.
So to continue on the idea of the Beautiful Oops book, which is wonderful. I've also been looking at Herve Trulet's books. Yeah. And I'm actually really torn because they're all so wonderful about which ones I want to pull in to Story for All Ages and in the classrooms.
Can you repeat what book that is?
I'll go get it.
So the author is Herve Trulet, Herve Pullet. And one of his books is Press Here.
Yeah.
And I believe his newest one is Let's Play. And it's this whole idea of pushing the different colors on a page and tilting the book and blowing on the pages to create these different effects. Mm-hmm. And in the end, it really encourages the children or adults who are reading this to try something new. And how creative and playful can you be? So they're really cool. And what I'm wanting to do for one of our all-age stories in the month of May is we have our PowerPoint up in front of the congregation at service, and I usually have some sort of imagery to go along with the story. And I'm wanting to make this story a little more interactive so that people are having to reach up like they're pushing on the dot. Oh, and cool. People are clapping and blowing toward the screen just to make it more playful, which to me, creativity and play go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm going on that one as far as stories and books. And he's just such a wonderful author and person anyway. He's so fun. Mm. Corina. One of the things that we started doing, which came in really helpful, especially when we started on Soul Matters back in September, is our minister created this grid through Google Docs. And she's super organized anyway, where it's the whole year laid out. And she has the themes for each month listed. And she has sermon ideas listed out for each week. If we have a special speaker coming in, they're listed in there. And it's every element of a service that's listed in there. Descriptions and quotes and hymns and special music and readings, the worship associates, so that when you're looking ahead.
How is she doing that even before the packets have been distributed?
You get a list of the themes for the entire year. They just released themes for this next year. So she goes ahead and lists all of the themes.
Right.
And if we need to adjust a sermon or a particular service title, we can do that as we get closer because life happens and society happens. And the packets come out about 6 weeks before. That's the goal, right, Katie?
Yeah, we try to do 8 to 10.
Right. So we can, as the months get closer, we can start narrowing down ideas and filling people in and filling music in and stories. And it's not just shared between the minister and I, it's the music director, worship associates, our AV people, our administrator, so that it keeps everyone in the loop. And it also kind of keeps all of us in check. Are we filling in the spots? And if a change needs to be made, everyone's aware of the change. And it's incredibly helpful, and it's nice motivation to make sure that everyone is in the know. And if there has to be a last minute change, which does happen in church life, everyone can be aware, and if you have to make a change, it makes you more mindful about what you're doing and who it's affecting when you have to make these changes.
Yeah. No, that's really, really true. So what you're saying is you basically have placeholders. You have like a structure where you have indicated these are all the elements of the service, and this is who's responsible for each part. And she kind of drives that train of saying, these are my kind of sermon and topics, and then you get a little domino effect from that, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's similar to what we're doing. My congregation, the minister and I are the only paid staff, and everyone else are volunteers. And they have a Sunday, and they're called the Sunday Services Team. And they meet and they discuss all of those things. And I try to attend those as much as possible, but I often wind up needing to just hear all that through the minister. But yeah, we have Google Docs and planning sheets that we use for each thing, but I think probably a lot more of it is left till the week of. I mean, they'll indicate who's going to provide the music, and they'll indicate, who's going to work the AV board, and they'll know who's going to do these things. But in terms of what each piece actually is, I don't know how soon that's really getting decided. And then he's trying to get ahead. That was really just about me and him, and the idea that we're trying to bridge RE curriculum to the sermon topic. And so how do we do that? Is that really collaborative, or am I just trying to keep up with what he's deciding? So that's the kind of shift I think that I have to try and push on.
I can say Soul Matters has been really helpful in that there almost always seems a way to tie it in. Yeah. So if the minister is like, we're doing this topic this week, I know that I can go to my packet and pull stuff out so that we get it as close as possible. Some weeks she has to pick.
I think I have ridiculously high standards on how close those things need to be. Yes. Just saying it's the theme of emergence is enough. We could have everything, just throw in emergence in there a couple times and we would have it covered, right? People would be getting it. But no, I'm like, it has to be an exact follow-on to what the minister said, so that you all are going to be literally saying the same words when you sit down to dinner on Wednesday night. Yeah, that's even happening. So
Can I add a thought or a question or just a connection I'm making, which is like, this feels like kind of a shift in like how I've been thinking about like planning the curriculum for the year, in terms of, it's like you think about the summertime, you have a couple months, you're going to kind of like set out what you're going to do for the year. I don't ever actually accomplish that, but it's sort of the way I think about it. And now with Soul Matters, this is a great conversation for me to listen to, because I think it's a different way of thinking of planning RE. And honestly, it's a little more sort of organic, or, I don't know, creative, or which fits better with me, where you maybe look long-term and you say, this is the big picture of what we're going to do. But as you get closer, you're like making tweaks and changes. And even the week before, like looking at the lesson and saying like, oh, we could add this in or that in. I guess I'm mostly just saying that to ask if that's what people kind of see. Are people kind of working, like, are you working on tweaking the lesson for the upcoming Sunday that very week? Or do you do more of a kind of planning ahead? And I think you're already speaking to this partly, but this is a great conversation for me to be a part of, because it's definitely a question I'm trying to figure out.
Amanda, this is Karina. I'll just say that what happens for me in the process is that you start very broadly the further out you are. So, okay, we've heard from Soul Matters that the themes for these months are going to be such and such. And then
Mhm.
and then 2 to 3 weeks before the start of the new month, I will meet with the minister and we will talk about kind of what his sermon topics within the theme are going to be for that coming month. So for May, we met in early April, second week of April, and I would have already reviewed all the packets at that point and have ideas in my mind of what I want to emphasize within that theme. And then also we're coordinating on our monthly columns. And so we will announce to the congregation what the theme is going to be towards the end of the current month. And so he might emphasize one thing and I might say something else about it, since we have kind of differing audiences who's reading our materials, we hope, fingers crossed, that anybody's reading anything. And then I have 2 teachers who teach pre-K through first and a second through fifth, who teach 3 out of the 4 Sundays of a given month. And every Wednesday, I send them a lesson plan that talks about what's coming up for that Sunday, and it will be pulled from the Soul Matters curriculum in some form or fashion. It might be, like Katie's mentioned, I might be using what she recommended as a Wonderbox story for a lesson or vice versa or whatever. But the ultimate, it doesn't really get set in stone what's coming up that Sunday until I feel like I've written it out for the teachers on that Wednesday. So today on a Wednesday. And if there's a certain story that they're going to use, I try and find a link on YouTube that tells the story so they can review it, because I'm not actually in the same but I spoil my teachers. I really give them everything. All I ask them to do is to review what I've sent them and email me back, or meet me early on Sunday and go over everything with me one time. But other than that, I give them all the materials. I've picked out, the activity that they're going to do. And it's an ongoing feedback thing. I mean, they say, oh yeah, that worked well, or that didn't, or I want more of this, or this kind of thing. But, and also, because the only reason they're doing 3 out of the 4 Sundays instead of all of them is that the first Sunday I do children's chapel, and I also reinforce the theme with the children in a one-room setting on children's chapel on the first of the month. So that's I hope that kind of explains to you kind of how it starts out.
Yeah, that's great.
And then
I hear a lot of similarities in what we do, and that's also useful to me.
All right. And I'd love to hear if Sam has a structure that she does.
I'm sort of the same, Karina, where I have an idea of the broad theme that's coming up. As it gets closer, I'm thinking of the ideas, I'm pulling something out. Someone will say, hey, have you heard this story? Or I'll see an idea for a project and go, oh, that would work really good for this week that we've got coming. And as it gets closer, the Tuesday before is when I actually have a finalized lesson plan. And I have everything set to go, the stories, the mindful moment, the activity, and send it off to the teachers if on the Friday beforehand. If you have a question, if you have a concern, email me, let me know, or come find me before class Sunday morning and I can answer your questions. But I've got everything set and ready to go because I want to make it as inviting as possible for these volunteers to come in and as easy as possible, because wrangling cats is difficult. And that's what we're doing sometimes. So if I can make...
Amen.
If I can make the preparation as simple for them as possible, so be it. But I also give them freedom to be creative themselves. If something is just not clicking with the class that particular morning, feel free to change something. If you see something else that's keying in with them, do it. And then let me know afterward what worked, what didn't, what did you try? Because I can add that in to future lessons. I want it to be as interactive a process as possible with the teachers. They're with these kids, they know these kids. If I were to shoot them down, we're gonna have a less successful program. Yeah, but Karina, I'm sort of on the same wavelength as how it breaks down and slowly builds over the weeks.
Amanda, I'm going to mute you just because we're getting a lot of background noise.
Oh, I didn't realize I wasn't muted. Sorry about that.
There you go. Or maybe you can mute yourself. I'm not sure how to do it just on an audio call, but it stopped. All right. Great. That was wonderful reflections. Thank you. Great. Solutions. And now we've got a few minutes, not very many, to do some takeaways. And Margaret, if you'd like to do any takeaway comments, you're welcome to join us for this piece. So I'm going to give you each, 45 seconds for anything takeaway from this hour spent together that you would like to share. I'm going to take away Karina as the correct way of saying that. Yay. Sam, do you have a takeaway?
Yes, I do. And my takeaway is relief in the camaraderie that we're all in the same boat and we all have similar experiences and similar stressors. And most of the time, this profession can feel a bit lonely. You're the only one who knows what you do in your congregation when it comes down to the meat of it. And to speak to other people that get it and are going through the same issues, it's a big relief to know that I am not the only one who goes through these things.
Hear, hear. Thank you. And Karina. I can't believe it.
Yeah, you're never going to get a pass from me. You're going to have to call me Karina from here on out.
I
No
know.
mistakes ever,
You just keep
ever.
beating me on the head. Really?
Yes, I also love coming to these calls because even though I get together with my DRE cluster in a similar way once a month, I really like every opportunity to chat with other DREs. And I also really like amplifying other DREs to my congregation. I love to be able to say, I learned this from my other DRE friend. I learned this from my colleague. I want us to have a kind of profile that that we exist, that we are that you know, there's a larger world of DREs, and I'm a part of something bigger than just, you know, what you all know from me right here in this congregation. So I think it helps to professionalize and formalize the work we do when we say, yeah, I have this from another colleague or my professional organization or, you know, my workshop that I'm taking, my professional development, things like that.
Awesome, Karina.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, exactly. And Margaret, hi.
Hi. So I popped back in to say I'm really glad I did this because we are looking to be on the same month. We've been relying on historic packets because we were concerned about being able to put all those elements together within the time frame. And so this is really helpful because I'll be able to go back to my minister, thank you, Karina, to say, when we choose to do this, we need to set ourselves that specific time. Packets show up, the next day we have a conversation or 2 days later. And I'll be able to say that when they decide, if you're gonna go to this version of the worship, let's try it that way so that we have that, that notion of calendaring that otherwise we wouldn't have. So I really appreciate that. And it's been interesting to hear what other folks are doing with this. We are looking at a different subject for next month. It's embodiment, so totally different, but it's very interesting to hear how creativity is coming up. And actually some of those things are embodying creativity, so they may pop in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret. And Amanda.
Well, a couple takeaways. One, it's just so great to have this collegial contact and to sort of hear how other people are working with theme-based ministry and to and RE programming, and sort of a lot of similarities that I hear and how people are thinking about and going through the process. And then for me personally, the other thing was actually it's great for me to be on these calls, not on the video, and just because honestly, one of the hardest parts of this work for me is having to sit so much. I am a person who my body just hurts if I have to sit. So I'm actually at the circus studio where I work, which is the background noise that you heard, doing handstands and stretching and stuff like that while we talked. So for me, that was great.
I love Oh, on that note, it's a wonderful note. We celebrate all the multiple intelligences of our religious education.
I think that goes into Margaret and her embodiment theme for this month. So there you go.
Exactly. Well, thank you all for joining us, and please feel free to contact me if I can help in other ways, and I hope to see you next month. We're not doing the brainstorming labs because we're done with our packets, but we are doing the implementation labs. So next month will be
Great.
third Wednesday of May.
Katie,
All right, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.